Okay, good morning. So, good morning. We're up to Shin Yud Gimel Seif Base. And we're talking about various bolts, door bolts, and what would be problematic in terms of boina and what is actually okay. So says the Mechaber, Kol Neger, any peg, she'amarnu, Mayri sheha eskufa kavaya kashenoyet zeisam b'mifton ein noikiv ba'aretz. Imagine a door bolt where you sort of lower the peg and it sort of goes into the threshold of the door. So that's okay, but if it goes into the ground itself, then it's going to be boina-like and you've got a problem. So therefore the Mechaber says, Kol nege shamanu marisha skufa gavaya, it's higher up, it doesn't go into the earth, into the ground itself. That when the peg goes into the whole noikev tachtov ba'aretz, it goes into the ground, have a binyan va'asa by, and then you've got a problem because you're inserting this peg directly into the ground, and that's the problem of boina. Says the Mishnah Berurah Sifeis Sifkot and Chaf. Even if you've got a club-like peg which is kosher, which is tied to the door, like a pounder that you pound spices, where you fashion some sort of peg, some sort of bolt, then it's clear that it's a kli, and therefore there's no boina concern. Because it's not the way to just leave it there forever. Now that this peg has got a definition of a kli, it looks like a kli, is a kli, and even if it's not tied, then you haven't got a problem. Even if you make a beis yad, if it goes into the ground, there's still going to be a problem of boina. Okay, nifchasa skufa chaf beis. If at the outset you made a cavity, like a hole in the ground, where the club is going to go into it, the bolt's going to go into it, you're not making any further hole in the ground. You've already fashioned out some sort of cavity, ein issa, which will be with our doors nowadays. He says later on in the footnotes, our doors nowadays are not really a problem. But if it's a cavity that you've made that is meant to go into there, then there's no problem. And therefore that makes it much easier for what many houses do nowadays. There's some sort of hole in the wall, mikan on either side, and you sort of keep the bolt in it, the lock in it, and it goes across from one side to the other. And we don't say that's a problem of boina. It doesn't make a difference if you go into a cavity in the ground or if you go into the wall. Since you've fashioned those holes in the first place, there's no problem. And moreover, since you've made some sort of metal ring on the lock, and that's what you hold on to when you open and close the lock, that's as if you made a beis yad. Even if the threshold sort of collapses and you're going into the ground, then there won't be a problem. But also beis yad ledas Rashi vatur yesh lahakol b'zeh mipnei tziruf tam harishon shel hataz. That you can say that if you've made some sort of beis yad, then it would be okay, especially for the first reason that Taz brings, that it was made with holes in it in the first place. Yeah, okay. Peseda Gimel Rechava she'acharei habatim. So you've got a courtyard at the back of the house. You don't go in and out of it regularly. And you've got some sort of door frame, and or you hang a sort of a mat of reeds. Or you've got an opening, a gap, which is enclosed with thorns, ke'in deles, which has a sort of a deles-like feature. Im yesh lahem tzir. If you've got a tzir, pirush tzir, neikvin hadeles v'koivin by eitz chad, kedei lachnisa ba'aretz lachza lekan lekan, some sort of hinge where you can open and close the door. Afilu ein lahem atza tzir, even if you haven't got a hinge, ele shahoy lahem tzir, that once upon a time there was a tzir there, there was a hinge there, then you're okay. No alim boin afilu hem negroim ba'aretz, you can close it even if it drags on the ground. Rak shekoshem atzlaim linol bohem, you tie it or you hang it to be noel, to close it. V'lo choshev kaboyne, and it doesn't look like boyne. She nikar bohem shu deles kivin shehoy lahem tzir, because once you've got the hinge, then you've got a door attached to it, so then it looks like a deles, and you haven't got a problem of boine on Shabbos. Says the Ramah, certainly if they've got a hinge on it right now, it's just that it doesn't go back into its place properly. In Siman Tovkuf Yutes. Okay. But if you don't have a hinge, or never had a hinge, then you can't close the door. Unless it was higher up from the ground. Or Pesach also because other than it looks like boina. But if you've got an opening where you've never had a hinge, but it's very clear that it's an opening, then that would be okay because it's clear that it's a deles and it's not a problem of boina. Okay, good. Zog the Mishnah Berurah, Todir. So we said that if you've got a rechava she'achari abatim, which you don't use frequently, if you make a deles there, or a gap which you enclose it with thorns, if it's got a hinge and it's recognizable that it's a door, then you're going to be okay. It's not a boina problem. Says the Mishnah Berurah Chof Gimel, Rotzalema, Va'alkein, Ein also lepasach el lezmanim rechokim, even though it's only sort of used from infrequently, because you don't really go through that opening. By you closing it up, it looks like it's being moisif ala binyan. You're adding to a proper structure, and therefore you've got a problem. Unless you go one of the heterim we used over here, the osmin kashem deles. So putting a block there or some sort of door, a piece of wood or something in this enclosure is binyan. It looks like moisif ala binyan, you've got a problem. But if there's a hinge and it looks more like a door, then you're going to be okay. That's the bottom line from this sif. So you've got a gap which you enclose with thorns. Sometimes you open and close it, now you want to lock it. It was clear there was some sort of hinge there. Before Shabbos, you attached it or you suspended it in order to lock it. So then you can use that on Shabbos, no problem. Even if they're open and they're dragging on the ground, they sort of rise and they go on the threshold. Since they were attached before Shabbos, then it does not look like Bain on Shabbos and there's no problem. That once you open and close it, they're not dragging on the ground anymore. Even a little bit. Even though there's no hekatzir, since you attached it to the door, it looks like a door, and therefore there's no problem with boina. Because the bolt is on the door, and it's clear. Therefore, there's a she'en nigros ba'aretz, and it's not dragging on the ground, and therefore it's not. It doesn't look like a boina problem. Everyone knows that it's there as a door. And this bolt is lying on the ground. You still need it to be attached somewhat. Which we'll get to in a sec. Even if this bolt is not attached at all, so long as there's a threshold and there's it looks like a door, and we can be makel V'ayim begrosh shekasav shekeinu das harifa Rambam aprat shekein sosam armos. Even if it's not attached to the door itself, but it looks like a door, and it looks like a sort of a lock for a door, a bolt, then that would be okay, and it's not a problem of bayna on Shabbos. Okay, let's just do Dalet. Deles ha'osui miluach echad. A deles, a door, which is made with one sort of big board of wood. Or she'eino askufa tachtoin, or it hasn't got a threshold at the bottom. Or cheshepoischim sheimtim oisav va'ikrim oisav. And therefore, the way to access this entrance is to take the board and literally lift it up and then put it there. There you've got a problem. Ein na'alim ba. You can't close that door even if it has a tzir, because it looks like you're taking a big chunk of wood and you're blocking it up, and it looks like baina. Avol deles ha'asuyim mikroshim harbe. But if you've got a door which is made up of lots of beams, sorry, that's okay. Even if you're sort of moving it when you open it, if there is an askufa, a threshold, and so too, if there's lots of beams there, there's some sort of opening at the top, where you put the boards in, that's, you just treat that like a door. So Bekitzer, what is the Mechaber saying? That if you've got this big piece of wood and you block it up against the opening, and then you move it and you put it back, you've got boner problems, because it doesn't look like a door.
Even if you've designated it as a door.
Oh, so let's see. We'll see the Mishnah in a second. But if it's clear that it's some sort of door, either because it's got lots of kroshim or whatever, then it would be okay. Interestingly, in footnote 11, he says here, "Dlosa shelonu she'af al pi she'en asuyin min luach echad." Even though they're made of one piece of wood, ba'asagon am nisan kareletz shem exactly shechal pesach. Which is your point. So long as it's clear that it's a deles, you haven't got a brain problem. Okay, let's just do the Mishnah Berurah. Lamed deles ha'osui hainu lefi she'ein lo tikunei hadeles kashat losses, because this deles hasn't got the appearance of a regular door. V'havi kastima ba'alman. It's just like, it looks like you're closing up this opening. V'nira kabayna, and it looks like you're over bayna. Or Mairi Khan, afilu Pesach also the Chnisa v'Yisir. Even if it's something, it's an entrance where you go in and out, by you taking this big chunk of wood and just putting it in front of it, it looks like baina. If you look at 13, number 13, he says, if you don't put it sort of smoothly or flush into the opening, you sort of rest it against the opening. It's like
here, this side gate.
Yeah.
It's one big piece of wood.
Yeah, but that's clearly a door. That's clearly a door. That's not a problem. We're talking about, you've got an opening and you've got this big sort of board of wood. So if you take it and you flush it and you put it properly into that thing, that's like, looks like boina. But as the Chazon Ish says over here, if you just rest it against it and it's not flush, then you won't have a problem.
Without hinges, without any
hinges.
Right, so once it's got hinges, then it looks like a door, for sure this one. Okay, let's finish off. Lamed Aleph, Mishnah Berurah, Miluach Echad She'ein, V'das HaRambam D'lei Osa Le'Betarti L'Reyosa. The Rambam says it's only a problem if you've got two factors. Hainu, She'u Miluach Echad, number one, it's made of one big piece of wood. V'gam Ein Lo Askufa, there's no threshold. But an opening where you go in and out regularly, because if you've got either one or the other, then that's sufficient to make it not a problem of baina. Lamed beis u'cheshepoischin mashma mizeh du mayri b'she'ena kashura, which is not tied. Avol imhi kashura tzeluya, if this door is tied, even if it sort of rests on the ground when you open it, shari af she'en lo tikunei dlosas karayu, then it will be okay, even if it hasn't got the sort of the normal deles features. V'hainu mishum dekan mayri b'pesach also deknisa v'yisir todah, because it's the very fact that it's an entranceway demonstrates that it's a door. That's its function. Alpha pishe shemtin hainu she'ena kshur klal. Alpha gav de bereish sif gimel b'deles sherechava shegam hi mistoma asuya b'kashad losses. This enclosure that we mentioned in the previous sif, l'cher is made like other losses. Va'afilu hachim machmirin she'e kosher v'tolim b'boidiyim. And nevertheless, we were machmir that it should be kosher and tolim b'boidiyim. Here in Sif Dalet, we're talking about an entranceway which is regularly used for Chanal. There, because the entranceway is regularly used, we don't need it to be attached. Like we said above. Okay. What's that going on? This is the Ramah. So if you've got lots of beams, but there's a clear cavity for where the beams are inserted, then Rotzolema says Mishabura, the Chakika nechsheves pas kaskufa. This cavity is basically effectively a threshold. Then Shadinam Kadelis. Rotzolema dafal gav da kroshim enim chubarim who machnis kol keresh b'fnei atzma. Even though you're putting the individual beams one by one, afilu hachin lenechsher kadelis shaluach echad, and therefore you haven't got a problem of boina. Hoyel ve'enon kvar kosavnu le'al da achroinim mitzadim lahokel af beluach echad. Given sheyesh la skufa v'uas lechnisa v'yisei todeh. See, the achronim mekel, if you've got one, even if you've got one big luach, one big board, since there's a threshold and the entranceway is regularly used, then it doesn't look like boina, and therefore it would be okay to put that luach over there.
So the threshold, you mean like a groove to put
Yeah,
it in?
yeah. So then it looks like a door. It's not just taking a random piece of wood and attaching it to a building, which is a problem in my opinion.
I thought it's more of a problem because then you stop.
Yeah, but it's demonstrating this is the door, and this is the way to do it exactly. Okay.